Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. There's a delay when I do the podcast, so typing it is quite interesting. Let me start with macro thoughts. Over the weekend I wrote this piece about the negative yielding bond universe, and I said, are the bond markets the canary in the coal mine, signaling an almighty contraction in global GDP? And I said then it is highly unlikely that this ends well. Home thoughts. Consistency is contrary to nature, contrary to life. The only completely consistent people are the dead. Pretty dramatic. I like this photograph by Kenya Pick's The Nation Centre building sticking out spectacularly in the awesome Nairobi night skyline. When I first came back in 2005, 2006, I used to spend my time there because that's where the stock market was held, in fact, before it became automated. I think names of colours are at the edge between where language falls and where it's most powerful. A.S. Byatt. The news that Rome has a new mayor took me back to one of my favourite movies, La Dolce Vita. Put up a photograph from that. La Dolce Vita is the Italian for the sweet life or the good life. 1960 Italian comedy drama, filmed and directed and co-written by Federico Fellini. The film follows Marcello Rubini, a journalist writing for gossip magazines, over 7 days and nights on his journey through the sweet life of Rome in a fruitless search for love and happiness. It is a remarkable movie. If you get a chance, do have a look at it. The reason, of course, I went to Dolce Vita was of the victory of Virginia Raggi, a 37-year-old lawyer turned politician who took 67.2% of the vote in Rome. I like this photograph she's posted of herself. And it's a pretty interesting development because it puts a lot of pressure on Matteo Renzi. Farage dons the tin foil as his Brexit appeal begins to falter. And there's been a pretty dramatic move in expectations, and the catalyst for that movement was, unfortunately, the assassination of a member of parliament. China seeks to renegotiate Venezuelan loans. China is renegotiating billions of dollars of loans to Venezuela and has met with the country's political opposition, marking a shift in its approach to a nation it once viewed as a US counterweight in the Americas. Venezuela is facing one of the worst crises of its 200-year history, with a collapsing economy and political deadlock stoked by the oil price slip. China, which is Caracas's biggest creditor and has loaned the country $65 billion since 2005, has already extended the repayment schedules for debts backed by oil sales. Beijing has also sent unofficial envoys to hold talks with Venezuela's opposition, in the hope that if President Maduro falls, his successor or successors will honor Chinese debts. One fact we shouldn't overlook is that Venezuela really doesn't have the money. I think there will be a rational solution for both parties, be it loan repayment extension or a loan restructuring. Fears that Venezuela might default on its internationally traded debt continue to rattle markets, where its bonds trade at distressed prices. The benchmark 2022 bond currently yields 33%. Venezuela wants a grace period whereby the country would pay only the interest due on Chinese loans, Reuters reported this week. IMF forecasts that the Venezuelan economy, which earns 95% of its export revenues from oil sales, will shrink by 8% this year. Inflation will reach 480%. Imports have more than halved over the past 5 years, leading to acute shortages of basic goods and sporadic food riots. One Chinese oil industry insider who believes it is in the country's long-term interest to accept looser conditions said, "Certainly the terms of the Sino-Venezuelan debt will have to be renegotiated, but there's no way it can be totally overturned. Take you back again to August 2015 when I said the end is nigh. And I was referring to Caracas, Luanda, Riyadh and Abuja. I said oil-based economies are going to contract. Currencies which have already collapsed are going to be routed, and Greek-style austerity will be the order of the day. The meltdown is coming. Saw this tweet from our West Head, visited a grocery store in Caracas. This is where the bread should have been. Also, no eggs and milk. And then there was a shooting inside Venezuela's central bank, wounded 2 and left the gunman dead. The President of Russia met with the presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan and posted this photograph. And apparently on June 25, Putin will go to China at the invitation of President Xi Jinping. Soros sees Russia emerging as a global power as the EU fades, which is an interesting point. Sees Russia emerging as a global power as the European Union collapses. The slow death of the Syria ceasefire brings a hybrid war with Russia closer. Gradually, the mist of ambiguity and confusion hanging over Syria is lifting a little. The landscape is sharpening into focus. With this improved visibility, we can view a little more clearly the course of action being prepared by Iran, Russia, and the Syrian government. Russia is emerging from an internal debate over whether the US is truly interested in an entente only in bloodying Russia's nose. And what do we see? Skepticism. Russia is skeptical that NATO's new missile shield in Poland and Romania, plus military exercises right up near its border, are purely defensive actions. Iran, meanwhile, is studying the entrails of the nuclear agreement. As one well-informed commentator put it to me, Iran is coldly lethal at the gloating in the US at having put one over Iran. Because while Iran has duly taken actions that preclude it from weaponizing its nuclear program, it will not now gain the financial normalization that it had expected under the agreement. Record 65.3 million people are displaced, often face barriers, UNHCR. ISIS uses technology better than most tech startups. Very interesting article in Vanity Fair. Ghost Security Group, a counterterrorism organization, has noted in the past that ISIS utilizes almost every social app imaginable to communicate and share its propaganda, including mainstays like Twitter and Facebook, encrypted chat apps such as Telegram, SureSpot and Threema, and messaging platforms including Kik and WhatsApp. The terror group shared videos of beheadings on YouTube and even more gruesome clips on LiveLeak. They use the remarkably secure Apple iMessage to communicate. They preach to their disciples across the world using internet radio stations. When a terror attack takes place, they use Twitter to claim responsibility, and their followers subsequently cheer with favorites and retweets. Perhaps most frighteningly, the group's dominance as a modern-day terror network is visible through how quickly their social media dominance is accelerating. ISIS has truly disrupted the very notion of war. We don't need tanks and guns to destroy this enemy as much as we need technology and data. At its core, ISIS has taken advantage of what people in Silicon Valley call the network effect. Terrorism is fundamentally a psychological warfare, so on a connected system, it becomes 1,000,000 times more effective. International Markets El Arian says slave to the market view dents Fed's credibility. Is spot on. Federal Reserve has become too dependent on short-term economic indicators and risks confusing financial markets with its shifting views. I have sympathy for the Fed. The Fed is trying to be as honest and as transparent as possible, and because of that, it is being accused of being not just inconsistent, but a slave to the market. What's really needed right now is for the Fed to take a vision, a multi-year vision, have conviction in that vision, and start guiding the markets rather than overreact to short-term data. Because if it continues to react to short-term data, it risks becoming what the Bank of Japan has. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro, dollar, 113.37, dollar index 93.54, keep an eye on 93. Japanese yen 104.43, Swissy 0.9613. The pound, which is what everyone's getting excited about these days, 147.07. And momentarily before that event, which saw the Joe Cox assassinated, we got as low as 140.10, I think, or 140.15. So we've rallied 7 big figures. A 1-week gauge of implied volatility for the pound dropped to 37.2% from a record close of 47.9% in the previous session. The probability of a vote to leave has declined to about 30% from almost 40% on June 15, according to Odds Checker. Sterling is almost certain to fall steeply and quickly if Leave wins the referendum. This is Soros. I would expect this devaluation to be bigger and also more disruptive than the 15% devaluation that occurred in September 1992, when I was fortunate enough to make a substantial profit for my hedge fund investors at the expense of the Bank of England and the British government. That took me back to the 29th of September 2014, when I was writing about Stanley Druckenmiller and George Soros, and I said they bet the bank against the Bank of England on September 16, 1992, and made off with £1 billion. And I like Stanley Druckenmiller's quote about what he does. As a macro investor, my job for 30 years was to anticipate changes in the economic trends that were not expected by others and therefore not yet reflected in securities prices. Soros has taught me that when you have tremendous conviction on a trade, you have to go for the jugular. It takes courage to be a pig, and as far as Soros is concerned, when you're right on something, you can't own enough. Probability of UK voting for Remain rises to 78%, higher since May. Brexit down to 22%. That's Betfair again. And you'll see how the surges. Jamie at Reuters tweeted, best day since 15th December 2008. That was yesterday, 5th, the biggest rise since the early 1990s. Euro dollar 113.37. Credit Suisse's share price is hurt by an unusually high level of short positions. This is Tian writing in a memo to staff last week. Credit Suisse shares have lost 42% this year, touching the lowest since at least 1989 on June 16. Short interest on Friday accounted for almost 13% of outstanding shares of Credit Suisse ADRs, up from 9% at the end of May. Let's move on to the commodity markets. Gold very much driven on Brexit expectations, 1282.20. Could see a sharp fall if the UK remains in Europe. Once the Brexit vote is passed, we will move back to moving on the real issues in the oil market. Supply and demand, Corcelli said. Oil has gained over 6.5% since Friday's open, and that was all on the back of this sharp rally in sterling. Let's move on to Sub-Saharan Africa. Ali Bongo on Dimba posted this photograph of himself. J'adresse tous mes encouragements aux jeunes Gabonais qui passent aujourd'hui les épreuves écrites du bac. I haven't got Google Translate available immediately, but you get the general gist of it. Sophie van Leeuwen. Today, judges at the ICC will sentence Jean-Pierre Bemba for war crimes and crimes against humanity. She will be there. The DRC's franc fell to a record low against the dollar on the parallel market, traded at an average of 1,001 to the dollar, bringing to 7% its decline this year. South African All Share up 4.61% this year. Dollar Rand, big move, 2.5%, naturally, as people put risk back on, 14.8112. Egyptian Pound, 888. Egyptian EGX 30, given up a lot of ground of late. It's only up 2.82% this year. Look at this photograph that President Buhari's people posted on arrival at the airport at Abuja. Nigeria's Naira slumped 30%. Looks a big number, but actually in the context of what's been going on, it's not a bad one. on Monday after the central bank removed its currency peg in an effort to alleviate the chronic FX shortages. Central bank sold $530 million for 280 Naira at a special auction and later sold a further $86.5 million directly on the interbank market at 281 to 285. Naira had traded just twice by midday before the central bank held its special auction to clear a backlog of hard currency orders. Less than $1 million had changed hands, prompting an extension of the trading day to 5 p.m. Black market currency dealers were quoting the Naira at 325 to 345 Naira to the dollar, up 10% since Friday. Have a look at this chart that Holger posted. Africa's richest person just lost $3.7 billion on that devaluation. Nigeria all shares up 0.45% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 11.39% so far this year. Kenya central bank governor quoted on Reuters about Brexit: "We think we are in a comfortable position." Adding a Brexit vote to leave the EU would hurt the global economy and Kenya would feel the shockwave, he said. Kenya's foreign exchange reserve stood at $7.6 billion on June 16. We've also learned that NIC Bank has been appointed as asset and liability consultant for Imperial Bank. Take a look at Rich Wrap-Up, scroll down to get the full notification, saying this follows the failure of IBL shareholders to provide adequate assurances to implement a proposal that would enable the prompt reopening of IBL and resumption of normal activities for its customers. NIC will disburse on behalf of KDIC a maximum of 1.5 million shillings each to the remaining IBL depositors. As soon as the High Court's suspension of payments to IBL depositors is lifted and subject to account and identity verifications that were conducted previously. Once completed on this basis, 45,700 depositors, equivalent to 92% of depositors, will have been paid in full or not claimed their balances of less than 2.5 million. A High Court ruling on the suspension of payments is expected on July 4. It is expected that depositors will be granted access in a structured manner to about 40% of the remaining amount of verified deposits above 2.5 million, which would bring the cumulative payout ratio for all verified deposits to an estimated 59%. Base Resources talks of a commencement of exploration on granting of tenure. This is an announcement that made to the ASX. Pleased to advise that it has been granted exploration tenure over a significantly expanded land area surrounding the company's Kwale mineral sands operations in Kenya. Expects to commence a drilling program in the September quarter. Proposed drilling program follows a successful airborne geophysics program conducted in 2015, covering the south coast region of Kenya from Mombasa to the Tanzanian border. Base Resources MD Tim Carsten said, "With Kwale at steady state production and having mined 22.2 million tons since commissioning in October 2013, we are excited by the prospectivity of the new tenement area and the potential to further extend the mine life of the Kwale operations." Have a look at this video I took of a rapid impact compactor when I visited base last, which was admittedly a while ago. Kenya Re's interest in Zephyr rose to 19.88% from the previous 15.44% we learned from that annual report. Kenya Re's unchanged for the year, but trades on a trading price earnings ratio of just 4.118. Nairobi All Share up 1.09% year to date. NSE 20 down 6.77% year to date and at 27th January 2016 lows. It's being reported that the CFO of Safaricom has been recalled back to London by Vodafone, not doing anything to the share price, which remains at a record or just marginally below. Once again, thank you for stopping by. By the way, if you want to follow the stock market, just go to rich.co.ke. Register, it's free. You get a password. Make sure you get that password. And then you go to Rich Live and you can track the whole stock market in real time. Once again, thank you for stopping by.